Purna Tatsaviturvaramurvam Jyoti Parasya Dhimahi Yana Satyena Dhimahi. So tonight we take up a brief study of the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of the Blessed One. We've come a long way from the Vedic age to the age of the Gita. The Vedic rishis put a great stress on living a spiritually rich life, one in which one felt oneself to be in concert with the cosmos. And there were attempts to consciously invest life with cosmic meaning through the means of the sacrifice, the offering. It was an outer symbol of an inner act. The Vedas gave way over millenniums, and the Upanishads, we like to say, made a bold effort to capture the spiritual kernel of the Vedic teachings and what they professed in their forest hermitages. The words, the philosophies, the perspectives were very different. The Upanishads made an outright declaration that all this is Brahman, all this is sustained by the breath, the power of the divine being. And that thing which you look and see out in the universe is in you too. So the teaching of the Upanishad was one of wonder, was one of great joy, without so much reliance on the ritual to achieve it. As ages and ages, centuries and centuries go by, the teaching of the Upanishads becomes more commonly known. So by the time we reach the age of the Gita, there is some understanding, even among common people, about what the great goals in life are. But by now also, we are reaching a kind of maturation of the Indian society. In the old days, the Vedas knew of two orders of people. You were an Aryan or you weren't. The division within the Vedic peoples was not fixed. There were the four Varnas, but they described natures. Those who were knowers, those who were the great protectors of society, those who produced wealth, those who worked, and nothing much more than that. But when we reach this time, those varnas are developing into jatis, into caste systems. So the order of classes is developing into a system of castes. And the different kinds of kingdoms that exist, where some were run by, you might say, Irenic kings who believed more in being a royal seer, one who is as accomplished in yogic exploit, in spiritual consciousness, as he is in sovereignty over a nation, bumping heads with other kingdoms which want the power but have not the wisdom. And so we arrive at an age where all of these things are in clash with each other. There are new orders of society trying to gain a foothold. There are more people. There is more division. There is not unity about what the right direction is in life. The richness of the Vedic life, the simple aims, have become obscured. And we arrive at a scene which opens the Gita to us, which is a mere episode in the longest poem in the world, the Mahabharata, the story of great India, where the protagonists and the antagonists are about to meet. What has led us to this? It is a scene of war. There were, to make a fabulously long story short, there were 5 brothers who were the rightful heirs to a great kingdom in India. They were called the Pandavas because they were the sons of Pandu. Pandu was no more. His brother, a blind king, Dhritarashtra, had 100 sons, and they formed the Kaurava clan. Those are the Kuru. You've heard us speak before of the Kuru kingdom, core to the world of the Veda. These 100 sons of Dhritarashtra are as bad as the Pandavas are good. So we have this great scene where the Pandavas, who are being denied accession to their kingdom by their evil cousins, the Kauravas, are only 5 in number, and they're outnumbered by 100. And so it is in the world. The good are always outnumbered by those who are either indifferent or antagonistic. So be it. The Pandavas say, listen, we are men of peace. If you'll give each of us, these 5 brothers, 1 village, we'll be satisfied and we'll call it a day. And Duryodhana, the chief of the 100, say, I will not give you so much of earth as will cover the head of a needle. You may have nothing. Honor is at stake. On Duryodhana's side is the great grandfather of them all, in a sense, Bhishma, the one who took a terrible vow, could have rightly run that kingdom for himself, but renounced it for reasons we won't go into here. On the other side is Arjuna, chief among the 5 brothers. The eldest is Yudhishthira, who is the incarnation, you might say, of dharma, of righteous or right action. And other brothers are there as well. Before this conflict is to begin, Krishna tries to mollify the situation. When he cannot, he says, as a great king himself, then I shall not fight in this battle, but I'll let you, Duryodhana and Arjuna, choose whether you want to have my army on your side of hundreds of thousands of people, or me, and all I will agree to do is hold the reins of the chariot. Duryodhana says, I'll take the army. And Arjuna happily says, I want Krishna in front of me. At this point in the story, there are some in India who recognize Krishna as being more than unusual. That he is not only wily and wise and strong and beautiful, but there is something godlike about him. In fact, a few probably know that he is openly the Godhead in a human form. Arjuna, however, does not know this. Arjuna has been sporting with Krishna. They go out and have fun together. They drink, they play, they shoot arrows, they have a lot of fun. And now, on the battlefield, They'll be a team. So, as this scene opens to us, there is a great field in North India. It's called the Field of the Kurus, Kurukshetra. And it is symbolic to all of us. It is the field of battle in this instance. And all the gods above are watching and acting through individuals on this scene. It's a field of human strife, but all the cosmos is waiting to see what is going to happen, because pivoting on this event is whether Dharma continues in India or whether chaos comes. And as goes India, so goes the world, we could say. So this king, the blind king, Dhritarashtra, opens Dhritarashtra Uvacha. Dhritarashtra said, Dharmakshetre, Kurukshetre, Samaveta Yuyutsava. In the field of righteousness, the field of the Kurus, when my people and the sons of Pandu gathered together, eager for battle, what did they, O Sanjaya, who through clairvoyance is going to tell everything that happens on the scene to the blind king, so it will be as if he was there. So they all pull up. Duryodhana says, Bhishma is chief to us. The great-grandfather. We have so many people. We have the greatest of armies. They are limited in number. What we have to do is protect the grandfather, Bhishma. So be around him. Bhishma gives out a loud conch cry to signal that the battle is ready to start. On the other side, Arjuna stands in his chariot. He who cannot be defeated, who has been promised victory by the gods, all he has to do is step into action. And he very proudly pulls up his chariot, Krishna near him, and he says, hold the horses for a moment. As he looks out there, letting them take his measure, letting them see that they are about to fight the greatest warrior on earth. He looks over, and what he sees across the way is Bhishma, the grandfather to them all. He sees Drona, the preceptor, the teacher, taught them everything they know about life. He too is an incarnation of Dharma. He sees his cousins. He sees his friends. He sees people that he's worked with every day. And he realizes he's about to kill them all. And he says, why am I doing this? What is happening to me? And he looks at Krishna and he says, my head is swimming and I feel faint. Look at all of these people who are about to be sent to their death simply so that I and my brothers, greedy for a kingdom, can have this land for ourselves. What are we doing? If we kill these people, there's no sense in life. Whatever we do for Dharma will be undone. If I do this deed, it is an evil according to the code. If I don't do it, it's an evil. I will throw my bow down. having spoken thus, and this is the 47th verse of the first chapter. You can see I've rather skipped along, haven't I? Arjuna sank down on the seat of his chariot, throwing away his bow and arrow, his spirit overwhelmed by sorrow, shoka. By the way, this is the end of the first chapter, and it says, in the Upanishad of the Bhagavad Gita, the science of the Absolute, the scripture of yoga, and the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna, this is the first chapter entitled The Depression of Arjuna. This colophon will appear after each of the 18 chapters in some of the versions that you'll read of the Gita. It is not in the poem itself, but it's been inserted into it. But it gives us a chance to pause and consider that, like the Katha Upanishad, which told a long story, and some of the Katha will appear in verses that we'll see tonight, the Bhagavad Gita might originally have been an Upanishad. The core of it might have been an Upanishad, which was so powerful and so popular that it was taken up into the most popular and powerful poem that was narrated around the country, the Mahabharata, as a necessary pivot to its overall teaching. How do we deal with division? How do we live in the world? How do we act when things get tough? And who are we really? What is the meaning of life? So, into the second chapter now, on Sankhya Yoga. Arjuna has thrown himself at the feet of Krishna and said, I look to you, in this my hour of need. Teach me, what should I do? And Krishna immediately says, take up your bow and fight. He said, don't yield to this faint-heartedness. This is unmanly of you. You are a kshatriya. You are here to protect dharma. You are here to protect your people. If you don't do it, if you run from the scene, you'll bring upon yourself infamy. You'll bring upon yourself inglory. And you'll abandon the good that you could do in the world. But Arjuna says, I don't see what will drive away this sorrow that I have, which dries up my senses, even as I look out and quest for an unrivaled kingdom on earth, even if I got the sovereignty of the gods. How would that satisfy me? So Krishna, Rishikesha, says, smiling, as it were, prahasan. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. You'll hear that often. The Blessed Lord said, you grieve for those whom you should not grieve for, and yet you speak words of wisdom. Wise men do not grieve for the dead or for the living. Never was there a time when I was not, nor you, nor these lords of men, nor will there ever be a time hereafter when we shall cease to be. What he's beginning to do here is to enunciate what is the popular knowledge of what is true about us, that the self is immortal. He goes on to say, as the soul passes in this body through childhood, youth, and age, even so is its taking on of another body. The sage is not perplexed by this. Contacts with their objects, they come and go. they don't last. The man who is not troubled by these, who remains the same in pain and pleasure, who is wise, makes himself fit for an eternal life. Know that by which all this is pervaded is indestructible. Of this immutable being, no one can bring about the destruction. And then we meet a verse, this is number 19 in Book 2, which we've already seen in the Katha Upanishad. In the second verse, it was verse 19 there. It says, "He who thinks that this slays, and he who thinks that this is slain, both of them fail to perceive the truth. This one neither slays nor is slain. He is never born, nor does he die at any time, nor, having once come into being, will he ever cease to be again. He is unborn, eternal, permanent, primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain." We've moved into the 20th verse in the Gita, and that is the 18th verse in the Katha Upanishad, substantially. Who knows that it's indestructible, unchanging? How can such a person slay anyone? How can anyone cause to slay? Weapons do not cleave, fire does not burn, waters do not wet, the wind does not dry. He is uncleavable, unburnable. He can't be wetted nor dried because it is eternal, all-pervading, unchanging, immutable, the same forever. Even if you think that the self is perpetually born and perpetually dies, even then you shouldn't grieve, because for one who is born, death is certain. And for one who is dead, birth is certain. Therefore, why would you grieve for something that's unavoidable? By now, you see, the idea of punarjanman, rebirth, has become entrenched in India. It began to make its clear appearance in the Upanishads. Maybe there's a seed of it in the Veda, but they were much more about this life here and now and getting to heaven where one can live with the fathers and the gods. Now, we're fully into the idea that everyone knows about, that one is immortal. And Krishna is reminding Arjuna of what he already knows. This is not a new teaching, but he's calling him to task. Look, you're grieving for people. You think you're going to kill them. You can't kill them. Their spirits are immortal. So let's go on, because that's only part of the reasoning here, isn't it? The dweller in the body of everyone is eternal and can't be slain, so you should not grieve for any creature. But having regard for your own duty, you shouldn't falter. There exists no greater good for a kshatriya than battle which is righteous. And here with the 31st verse, we've moved away from a section, I think from around verse 12 or 13 all the way through 30, which is commonly recited when someone passes away. We say it as if to say to the departed spirit, this is what you are. You have not died because you always were. What is, always is and can't go out of being. What wasn't can't come into being. You're with us still, but spiritually, because your real essence is a spiritual reality, not a physical, time-changing substance which pulls itself together and then disintegrates with time. The spirit never disintegrates and never decays. But now, Krishna is saying, back to the here and now. There's a war afoot, and you've got to fight. So he's reminding him that the valiant thing for him to do is to step into the battle, take up his arrow, take up his bow, and defeat them. because that is what he should want to do. That is, in a sense, what he was born to do. But not in the normal sense, because in this 38th shloka verse, he says, which is the beginning of a deeper teaching, make the same to you pleasure and pain, gain and loss, victory and defeat, and yoke yourself to the battle. Yuj, that root verb, means as if you're yoking yourself to a plow and you're going to restrain yourself and go straight ahead. This is the sense of yoga in the Gita as we meet the term in this early section. Get ready for battle by yoking yourself through equality, and in that equality you won't be committing a sin as you seemingly destroy your opponent. And he says, this is the Sankhya wisdom given to you. Now, listen to the wisdom of yoga. If you can accept this, if you are yoked by this intelligence, then you'll cast away the bondage of works. So here we've reached a transition point. This is no longer the common teaching. Now he's going to tell him what it is about his approach to work that needs to change. And he says, in this path, no effort is ever lost and no obstacle prevails. Even a little of this dharma saves one from great fear. The understanding is single, but the thoughts of the irresolute are many-branched and endless. The action of the threefold gunas is the subject matter of the Veda. But do you become free, Arjuna, from this threefold guna? Be free from the dualities. Be firmly fixed in purity, not caring for acquisition and preservation, and be possessed of the self. Because, and here we arrive at the 47th shloka, to action alone you have a right, and never at all to its fruits. Let not the fruits of action be your motive. Neither let there be in you any attachment to inaction. So, in other words, the idea is to approach the work, whatever it is, as if it has been given to you, sanctioned for you to take it up. Nobody should take that work away from you. But whatever comes from that work, whether it's good or bad, does not belong to you. Only the work itself belongs to you. You have no claim on that fruit. That fruit goes elsewhere. And this is the beginning of a suggestion of a different kind of sacrifice, a different kind of offering than the Vedic ritual signified. This is all inner. But don't make the mistake of thinking, Arjuna, that inaction is the cure. Arjuna 10 minutes ago wanted to walk away from the battlefield. He wanted to renounce the world and become a sannyasi. And he has been told that that's not the way to do it, that the way you do it is by renouncing the fruit of the work. And now Krishna has to build upon this. He says, yoking yourself to this, being fixed in yoga, do your work abandoning attachment, with a mind that's even in success or failure, for that is what is called yoga. Samatvam yoga uchyate. And far indeed, he continues, far indeed inferior to mere action. I've got that backwards. Far inferior indeed is mere action to the discipline of intelligence, the Buddhi Yoga. Those who seek for the fruits of their action are lost. But one who has yoked his intelligence casts away, even here, both good and evil. So strive for yoga, because yoga is skill in action. Yogaha karmasu kaushalam. This is one of the great sayings in the Gita. And it confers upon us the idea that if we can learn through dedicating our action, release the reins, release our grasp, then in that evenness of mind, we come to recognize the spiritual reality that is in us and above us and around us, suggesting that it is our desire for these objects that is holding us back, attaching us to a small aim, preventing our real growth, and allowing us to live in a state of perpetual confusion. Arjuna has been listening to this, and he gets the idea that he's supposed to work, he's supposed to even fight without attachment, and in a state of evenness of consciousness, what we call samatha, an equality, which is difficult to achieve. And he's wondering, where can I see such an example as that? Where's one? So he asks the simple question: how does a man with this wisdom stand? How does he walk? How does he sit? So he's looking for outward signs of what is a spiritual being, you know. It isn't necessarily the fellow sitting on a cushion, right? Sri Bhagavad Uvacha. He begins to speak, and he goes directly to the inner significance. He doesn't touch this idea about what this fellow might look like. He says, when a man puts away all the desires of his mind, when his spirit is content in itself, then he's called stable in intelligence. He's untroubled in the midst of sorrows. He's free from desire for pleasure, free from revulsion to pain. And this man is called a sage. This is a yogi. Without affection on any side, who doesn't rejoice or loathe, who draws away his senses from the objects of sense on every side, as a tortoise draws in his limbs. This is a yogin. Even the mind of the wise man who labors for perfection sometimes his impetuous senses carry off this person by force. So Krishna recognizes that even after one has this wisdom settled in one, sometimes nature gets the better. It wins an inning. Doesn't mean it wins the war. But you continue to work, you continue to control your senses, you continue to remain firm, and now Krishna inserts another idea. You remain firm in yoga, intent on me. For whose senses are under control, his intelligence is firmly set. So this idea that he is the object upon which the consciousness should fix itself is first time we've seen this in the Gita. It will become dominant momentarily. So we're closing in on the end of this chapter. In the 71st shloka, he says, "He who abandons all desires and acts free from longing, without any sense of mine or egotism, he attains to peace, shanti." This is Brahmastiti. Having attained this, one is not again bewildered. Fixed in that state, even at the hour of death, one attains to Brahma Nirvana. This is worth pausing over. Krishna has just mentioned that fix yourself on me. He hasn't said what that me is yet, but now he's described the state of liberation, the state of enlightenment, where you are fixed, sthiti, in Brahman, as being a Brahma Nirvana. Nirvana, we know in our study of Buddhism, completely different field, completely different significance to the word. For Buddhism, it suggests the blowing out of the sense of self. For here, it is not a blowing out of the sense of self into a nothingness, but an emergence of the being into Brahman, which is a positive being. Not a nothingness, not a shunya, but positive being. What becomes blown out is the sense of separation. So it is the abolition of ego. As the drop, in a sense, merges into the ocean, that sense of droppiness is gone. So, too, the soul, merging into that, knows what that is. We'll see that that does not erase the being which moves and lives in time, but it establishes a state of oneness of the human soul, the jiva, in the great soul, the Paramatman. And that ends the second book, the second chapter. So the third is how to do yoga in the world, in works. He says, so why are you asking me to do this? And the Blessed Lord says, there's a twofold way of life that's been taught. The path of knowledge for men of contemplation and that of works for men of action. But it's not by abstaining from work that a man attains freedom, nor is it from renunciation that he gains perfection. For whatever you do, as long as you're in this world, you're compelled to act. There's no way, even just drawing a breath is an action. So avoiding action is impossible. You must act. So what do you want to do? Recognizing that intentional action, conscious action, is better than unconscious inaction. You have to do it as an offering by doing works other than for sacrifice, you fall into error, you fall into confusion. But doing all works as an offering, you become progressively free, because you begin to erase egoism, which tinges everything otherwise. As you give, as you give, as you give, you're more and more fixed on the other. This is not unknown. I worked for a man once who had a general meeting, and he said, I know that some of you are suffering in your lives. I know that some of you have trouble. And you come to work and you feel troubled. Let me tell you, the way to get out of that is to go and find yourself a customer and help them as well as you can. Identify what their real needs are. Satisfy them. Give them your full attention. By the time you've completed doing that, you won't remember the trouble. There's profound truth in that. I met that gentleman again just a few days back. He didn't remember having said that. He said, oh, you said it's true, but that didn't come from me. It came from someplace else. I said, well, you had to be the instrument through which it was delivered. And just so, divine work can happen anywhere, yes, whatever the field. Whether you're conscious of being the author of it or not, inspiration flows through you when you're open. So this idea of how we make everything a conscious offering, a yajna, is central to the Gita's teaching. This leads us to a state of being yukta, to the Supreme. And now we're beginning to see that the Supreme is not just this blank, impersonal Brahman, but is beginning to take on the definition of a great person. Maybe we can't see the outline of that face, but we sense that there is a person there. And we'll be getting more and more into that in coming chapters and coming weeks. So finally, the man whose delight is in the self, the Atman, who is content in the self, who is satisfied with the self, for him there exists no work that needs to be done. The state of communion can become so powerful from offering the wood that all sense of being the small ego and the doer evaporates, and only the self is left. But works do not cease with that realization of the self. They continue, because he knows that those are part of the action of nature. It is distinct from that, always eternal. It supports the phenomenal play. So, in the 20th verse of the 3rd chapter, it says, it was even by works that Janaka and others attained to perfection. So you should do work also with the view to Loka Sangraha. Janaka is one of the great royal sages of ancient India. He was the father of Sita, and at least according to one mythology. But he was the great king who entertained Yajnavalkya. And Yajnavalkya recognized in this king that he had the kingdom of the self within. Even though he was the sovereign of the nation, he was also a realized being. And he continued to work. He continued to run the kingdom, to equally distribute justice to all. In his kingdom, they say, There was no vice. No one went to bed hungry. A great king. So, we should do the same thing for Loka Sangraha. Loka, world, Sangraha, holding together. So to hold the world together, we should do work. To hold the people together, we should engage in life. It is not for us to leave the world to realize the Spirit, but in realizing the Spirit to share the riches of that enlightenment with all around, because it benefits all. Remember how the Vedic ritual wanted to hold the world together by the correct enunciation of the mantra, by the correct ritual procedure. And if you did it right, the stars wouldn't fall from the heavens and earthquakes wouldn't happen on earth, and society would be stable. So here, if inwardly we do work correctly, we hold the world together from that basis. By being right inside, the world is right outside. There's a recognition that the turbulent human nature can cause a lot of disturbance in the rest of the world. That is implied. And there's another thing. If one is going to be like Arjuna, a royal sage, then his example is going to be emulated. The person who lives in a consciousness of equality, who is serene in temperament, who is powerful in action, impresses himself upon the world. You've met people like that. You've seen how they inspire. We've seen how Sri Aurobindo and the mother, in their intimate actions, inspired everybody in that ashram. We've seen how Ramana, as a pillar of silence, inspired others. And just so, Krishna expects Arjuna to walk out into the world and be aflame with divinity and catch others on fire as well. Use your consciousness, Arjuna, to wake others up, because they'll always want to follow the best example they can. We'd rather have an Arjuna acting in an enlightened way than the latest celebrity on you name the channel leading the world. We want people, we want all those who live a spiritual life to make themselves felt in the world. It is only so that the world can change. Not from us running off to establish a colony of spiritual isolationists, but rather to deal with the demerits of the world as we have it and improve it from the ground up, from a consciousness which is one with all, but primarily one which is one with that which is beyond all. Then Krishna says in the 22nd shloka, there's not for me, Arjuna, any work in the three worlds that I have to do, nor anything to get that I need, but I'm engaged in work. So we had a note just a few verses ago when he said, concentrate on me and you'll get to that realization. Now he says that I am constantly at work, even though there's nothing that I gain from it. I don't need this universe. And this fellow is standing right in front of Arjuna, speaking like this. So Arjuna is beginning to realize that there's something unusual about this man. Krishna goes on and says, if I ever stopped working because everybody follows me, these worlds would fall to ruin. And I would be the creator of chaos. And I would destroy these people. And so I continue to act. Now, is he speaking as the man, the king, or is he speaking as the divine being beyond? He's suggesting that this is a question that exceeds the scope of humanity and originates in the divine being, because it's true there. If the divine quit functioning in the world, withdrew its Shakti, what world would there be? If it drew 0.1% of its nature out of the world, all would collapse. We'll skip over to the 35th shloka. Which is an injunction to be yourself. Better is one's own law, though imperfectly carried out, than the law of another, carried out perfectly. Better to die fulfilling your own law than to follow another. Arjuna was born a kshatriya. He's been put on this battlefield to perform for the divine. If he threw that away because he has become interested in this ideal of sannyasa because the world is imperfect and he'll just quit the world, that may be okay for some people. It is not okay for Arjuna. He would be abandoning his true calling. He would no longer be himself. At some point later, he would find out to his ruin how much he has lost and how much he hurt others by not doing what was the right thing for him to do, which, despite all appearances, is to, in his case, engage in war, to destroy, to kill. Therefore, Arjuna, control your senses from the very start and slay this sinful destroyer of wisdom and discrimination, this confusion. The senses are great, and greater than the senses is the mind, greater than the mind is the intelligence, but greater than the intelligence is he. This, again, is from the Katha Upanishad. And thus, knowing him who is beyond the intelligence, steadying the lower self by the higher self, smite the enemy in the form of desire. So hard to get at. So the real enemy is not the people over there, it's that which confuses us. When we act in a way where we think we're the authors of the action, we're already wrong. When we're doing it because we have a secret motivation to get some perceived good, we're already wrong. When we know what we are because we have sedulously given and given and given until there's no difference between us and that to whom we give anymore, and we recognize that, this self, this Atman, is that self, that Atman. That am I. Then we have shed confusion, and now we can really act. And this is the wisdom that Krishna is inviting Arjuna to attain through work. Work leads to knowledge. Work leads to the revelation of the oneness of being. Good old-fashioned work. Chapter 4. Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga. This is the chapter which deals with the yoga of renunciation of action and knowledge. So this is going to continue this theme. And he begins by saying, I proclaim this imperishable yoga to Vivasvan, who gave it to Manu, who gave it to Ikshvaku, and thus handed down from one to another. The royal sages knew it until this yoga was lost to the world through the lapse of time. When he says Vivasvan, that's the sun. So Krishna has just said, I gave it to the sun, who is, as you remember from the Veda and the Upanishads, the truth consciousness, the original creator, even beyond the gods that we knew, Indra, Varuna, Agni, all of them. Solar was supreme. So he gave it to that Godhead. Krishna gave it to that Godhead. That Godhead gave it to the head of humanity, Manu, and all the way down. And royal sages, Kshatriyas, the men of wisdom from the Kshatriya tribes, and not the Brahmins, had this knowledge about how to work in the world. The Brahmins coding themselves and their scriptures with the essential rituals that led to that. The Kshatriyas having this dynamic power to reach the same realization. This royal yoga, given by Krishna originally, has been lapsed. But now he's given it to Arjuna again. And he says, Arjuna says, just a second. Your birth was later than that, and earlier was the birth of Vivasvat, the sun god. So how did you tell him this? And Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, he says, many are my lives. Those are past. And yours also, Arjuna. All of them I know, but you don't know them, scourge of the foe. Though I am unborn and myself is imperishable, though I am the Lord of all creatures, yet establishing myself in my own nature, I come into being through my power, Maya. Atma Mayaya. This is an important concept, and we'll deal with the term Maya until August, at least. I don't know that we'll ever quit dealing with it. So Krishna has essentially just said, I am the conscious divine. I am that which originates the cosmos. He says, and I made this cosmos by compressing with my own power of delimitation, which is what Maya is, the power to take the infinite and make it finite, to measure out. That's what Maya means, to measure out. He said that is how this and I come into being. And he said, this is essentially how I have manifested here in this human form. And now he goes on to say, I come when Dharma is challenged. But he's talking about Dharma not as the code of ethics that we all understand in the Manusmriti, etc. He's talking about Dharma, which is the law of the cosmos. Where cosmic order is imperiled, he says, I come again and again. Apparently, you can't put it down once because it comes back like bamboo. For the protection of the good, for the destruction of the wicked, for the establishment of righteousness, I come into being from age to age. He who knows thus in its true nature my divine birth and works isn't born again when he leaves his body, but comes to me, O Arjuna. In other words, if you've come to know me that well, then even as you leave this world, I take you into my being. You do not lapse into the apparent unconsciousness of death. You come consciously into me. Then he goes on, this is an important verse. It's the 11th verse in the 4th book. As men approach me, so I accept them. Men on all sides follow my path. According to your nature. You don't have to be like anybody. Even if you admire somebody else, you have to do it your way. And the way that you choose that's in consonance with your being is the right way, and the divine is waiting for you there. The fourfold order, pardon me, this is the 13th sloka. The fourfold order was created by me according to the divisions of quality and work. Know me for the doer of this, who am yet the imperishable non-doer. So just as he is bidding us to do, even though he sustains the cosmos with his action, he too is making no claim to anything and does not perceive himself to be acting even when he acts. One has to understand, he says in the 17th verse, what action is. And one has to understand what wrong action is. And one has to understand about inaction. In other words, that not acting is not necessarily not acting. Hard to understand. Thick, gahana karmano gati. Thick, like a forest, is the way of works. So you really have to have a sharp eye and an open intelligence to get your way through it, because who sees action in inaction and action and inaction in action, he is wise. He is in yoga, yukta, and he has accomplished all his work. So if you can watch somebody take up a terrific work and perceive that nothing has been done, he is not the doer. And you see somebody else doing all this furious work, but just the opposite is true. Or that somebody can sit still and accomplish great and mighty things inwardly acting and never take an outward action. Then you have sight. This and a verse earlier might remind you of this Taoist truth, that because a Taoist sage sits unknown and unseen in a shed, the rest of the kingdom prospers. Because in him is established that order of being. Because the Taoist lives in harmony with all things. Heaven and earth are at one in his being. And because he has established that in his own being, even though he lives out of sight of everything, he is more important to the function of the universe than the functionaries of the government who think they're accomplishing all these things. Unseen and silent, he has done the mightiest work. So let's skip over. We have this idea, I think, that it is by doing works and having renounced the fruit of the work that we attain oneness. And many forms of sacrifice, according to the nature of the individual, are possible to us. And that in each case, we carry the offering and we place it into the mouth of the Brahman, that fire of offering. But it's an inner fire. And where do we find that inner fire? In the heart. We learned that from the Upanishads last week. That this fire is not necessarily on the Vedi, the altar, but it exists in our being. So that's where we get rid of our ego, is in the middle, in the very center of our own nature. That's the soul. That is what lives in communion, or can live in conscious communion with the divine, if we will it. So when we're fixed on that, and we give everything we give to that only, and not to outside agencies, we may place it in their hands, but really we're giving it to that. Then we become free. And when you know that, you don't again fall into confusion, when you have become established in that truth. Therefore, having cut asunder with the sword of wisdom this doubt in your heart that's born of confusion, resort to yoga. Stand up, O Bharata. And that's the end of that chapter, with a call to join the battle. He's just talked about getting to a state of oneness with the divine through knowledge. But it is a knowledge that permits and encourages and enjoins action upon us. So, in the 5th chapter, we continue to deal with the idea of sannyasa, the idea of renunciation. Let's see if we can find our way to the core of it. In the 13th verse, I keep saying book and I mean chapter. The embodied soul who has controlled his nature, renouncing all actions by the mind, dwells at ease in the city of 9 gates, that's the body, neither working nor causing work to be done. But who finds his happiness within, his joy within, and likewise his light only within, that yogi becomes divine and attains to the beatitude of Brahma Nirvana. We get back to that idea of the extinction of the small self in the great being. And to those yatis, those who have renounced and live a very difficult life of austerity in the mountains, for instance, of India, delivered from desire and anger, and subduing their minds and getting knowledge of the self, they discover that Brahma Nirvana exists on all sides. So they too, the Gita is saying, come to this truth which we commonly hold. But they do it through a life struggling with austerity outside of the world, and we're asking you, Arjuna, I'm asking you, Arjuna, to do it in the world. And so I just skipped through the 5th chapter, on to the 6th chapter, Dhyana Yoga, the yoga of meditation. Work is said to be the means of the sage who wishes to attain to yoga. And when he gets there, serenity is said to be the means. This is a nice turn of phrase. What Krishna is trying to say here is that You do yoga as an aspirant to get to that state of consciousness, to get free, to drop confusions, to live in delight. And once you get to that state of yoga, you continue to act from the state of yoga, but now, because shanti, shama, calm is your means, you continue to practice yoga. You continue in that state. It's not that you get there, everything is over. No, it's just that now a higher life begins for you, one which is always based in the state of yoga. You have used yoga as a means of yoking yourself to that, and now yoga becomes union. You are yoked to it. Yuj, yukta, yoga. And now the yoga for you is to remain connected. Simply to remain connected. So yoga doesn't end with the victory of release. Yoga continues. Just so, Krishna continues to do yoga in the world. If you'll permit me, the 8th shloka in the 6th chapter. The yogi whose soul is satisfied with wisdom, jnana, who is unchanging inwardly, master of his senses, to whom a clod, a stone, a piece of gold are the same, is said to be in yoga. So this idea of the sameness of existence we see in Janaka when he is a king, how he regards all, even commoners, even the forest, the seat upon which he sits, as being equally divine. We see that reflected millenniums later in Ramana Maharshi, who regards monkeys and dogs and kings and Shudras all as the same being, because all he saw anywhere was the self, the Atman. This is the same truth reverberating over the years. Except Krishna, again, is placing an accent on working in the world. But working in the world from a state of equality, with samatha in the consciousness, of conscious union with the divine, so that it would be more correct to say that the divine acts through one. That nature alone is acting, but that nature is the divine will expressing itself through one's apparent being. That in which he finds this supreme delight, sukham, perceived by the intelligence, beyond the reach of the senses, wherein established he no longer falls away, that on gaining which he thinks that there is no greater gain beyond it, wherein established he's not shaken even by the heaviest sorrow, let that be known by the name of yoga, this disconnection from union with pain. This yoga should be practiced with determination, with a heart that's undismayed, a heart that's lifted up, that's happy, shoulders back, head up, abandoning without exception all desires born of selfishness, restraining the mind with all senses. Let him slowly, Shanaihi Shanair, gain tranquility by means of reason, controlled by steadiness, and fixing the mind on the self, think of nothing else. What makes the wavering and unsteady mind wander away, let him find it out and restrain it and bring it back to control, so that you see only the self. For the supreme happiness comes to the yogin whose mind is quiet and peaceful, whose passions are at rest, who is stainless and has become one. Brahma Bhutam, who has become one with the divine. One being, sharing one being with Brahman. So, in this state of union, the yogin who puts away division, puts away littleness, experiences the infinite bliss. Atyantam sukham ashnute. We get to the 30th shloka. He who sees me everywhere and sees all in me, I am not lost to him, nor is he lost to me. The 31st. The yogin who established in oneness worships me, abiding in all beings, lives in me, however he acts. You can see that we're going from the divine described as Brahman, an impersonal, indescribable reality, unmixed, to the description of the divine as a great personality who happens also to be presenting himself in human form at the self-same time. So reality is transcendent, reality is personal, it has cosmic placement, and it is individualized. And Krishna is telling him, be like me. He's telling him, live in the transcendence of Brahman. Understand that all beings are figurines of me. Discover your own being in me, and then you will become sovereign of all. And you will be free, not claiming any of it, because of the limitation of desire and attachment. Arjuna doubts whether the mind can be controlled. Krishna assures him that it can with practice, because we don't get there in one jump, most of us. It takes time. It's a gradual ascent. So Arjuna is wondering, well, what if I fail then? What if I do my best and I don't make it? Do I lose this world of the satisfactions that I know and fail to attain heaven? And Krishna says, no, there's not destruction for you. In a sense, everything continues on. If you fail, you'll be born in a better place. Maybe you'll even be in the house of a sage. But certainly you will be in a better birth. And you'll come back and you'll continue on the path until you get to the goal. Nothing is lost. Not a drop of effort on the path is wasted. But the yogi who works assiduously, cleansed of all sins, perfecting himself through many lives, he attains to the highest goal. And this yogin is greater than the ascetic, the tapasvi. He's greater than the man of knowledge, jnana, that this aspirant would have. Greater than the man of works, because he has them all together. He has mastered knowledge. He has mastered work. And so he has the greater siddhi. And now, a very important final verse in the 6th chapter, Shloka 47. And of all yogins, He who full of faith worships me with his inner self abiding in me, him I hold to be the most attuned, the most yoked to me. So this is the opening call to the yoga of devotion, bhakti yoga, which we will see playing an important role in the, especially in the close of this. Of all yogins, he who with all his inner self given up to me, for me has love and faith, him I hold to be the most united with me in yoga. This, by the way, is an early version of the message of the Gita put together by Nilbaran Roy, who was a disciple of Sri Aurobindo. He pulled together Sri Aurobindo's renderings of the Gita from essays on the Gita and wanted to publish them in this book form. And Sri Aurobindo said, only if you say that it's not my translation. Because he felt that he had not translated it. He had rendered the Gita in the way that he needed to, as he wanted to expound the teachings of the Gita in essays. So he never regarded it as a strict translation. What I've been working with tonight is Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan's translation, which is imperfect. And I think it's a little difficult sometimes to be reading from this book and talking to you at the same time. And I know I've kept you a long time tonight, almost an hour and a half. So maybe next time I'll simply summarize and not read so many verses to you. I see some heads nodding. Maybe that would be a good thing. The police are open 24 hours a day. You can lodge a complaint tonight. Let me ask you if you have any questions about the first 6 chapters of the Gita. Is this not a rash thing to attempt? The Gita in 3 nights. I think anybody that asks the question will be mugged by a crowd. Listen, I appreciate your long-suffering patience. I know that you have done this desirelessly. So let us proceed to our meditation. Namaste, Jai Ma. And whoever is there, appreciate your being with us. We look forward to seeing you later on. Thank you. Namaste.